What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. I want to start out this video by first of all saying thank you all, everybody who's tuned in and watched my video from North Dakota State at South Dakota State. That was an incredible environment, incredible experience. Not the most incredible game, but overall such a blast to go to that game and be able to see all you guys in the comments who are obviously either North Dakota State fans or South Dakota State fans. So thank you for tuning in. Hoping to get maybe more content like that. I'm certainly going to be trying to devote a little bit more time to talk about the FCS on this channel if my regular work, being a sports editor at the Council Bluffs Nonpareil, allows for it. But before I get into things in this video, if you go on to enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. In this video, I'm going to be going over kind of breaking down the week 9 action in the SEC because there's a huge storyline that just broke. I had filmed the first segment of this video, recorded it, and was going to record a bit more, and some big news broke, so I'm starting it all from scratch, going over that big news. I'll also have videos on the Big Ten and then kind of the rest of college football. So kind of 3 videos, hopefully. If not, I'll throw it all together into one, but you guys know the drill from here. Let's get right into it. So out of the SEC this week, the huge storyline, this is the leading storyline in college football now, as of Sunday evening while I record this, Brian Kelly was dismissed or fired by LSU. Disappointing season so far. The offensive issues have been well documented, and things kind of came crumbling down on Saturday in Baton Rouge, in Death Valley. It was a huge third quarter for Texas A&M. The Tigers led 18-14 at halftime, but Texas A&M won the third quarter 21-0 to lead the Aggies past LSU on the way to a 49-25 rout in Death Valley. Marcel Reed overcame 2 interceptions in the game and ended up with 4 total touchdowns, 310 total yards, and the Texas A&M defense was dominant. They were all over the field, 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and 5 pass deflections. Cassius Howell led the way with 2 sacks. He's now up to 10, which is one of the best marks in college football. For LSU moving forward, Brian Kelly is no longer going to be the head coach, and there's plenty of LSU fans who are happy about that. I think it's a bit of kind of more evidence of where college football is at, especially in this season. The coaching carousel has been crazy. Teams seem really quick to move on. Florida kind of made sense. They had been struggling under Billy Napier, right, just under 500, but Penn State and LSU were kind of surprises. You know, Oklahoma State, Arkansas, Virginia Tech, those other coaching changes made a little bit more sense. This one is a little bit, it makes sense in the context of this season, but if you would have said going into the season that these coaches would be fired in season for having, 3 losses, I would have said you were a bit crazy maybe, or that is ridiculous. That's pulling the trigger pretty quickly, but it is so much about winning and winning often at programs like this and winning the big games, which is something that Brian Kelly did not do at LSU. Neither did James Franklin at Penn State. And ultimately that's why these teams are moving on. Speaking of moving on to the rest of the SEC, this was going to be my leading story. Ole Miss defense kind of proved itself in a 34-26 win over Oklahoma in Norman. Sunterin Perkins had a good game. Something that I noticed, though, too, and that I kind of saw while watching the game, especially making that play that he made late in the game. It was almost called a strip sack. It came back, was called an incomplete pass, but he got to John Mateer, forced an incompletion there, and he's been a disruptor. He doesn't have the same numbers that he had last year, but they talked about on the broadcast that he's just making an impact in different ways, and I kind of saw that just watching that game. They held the Sooners to 10 first-half points, the Rebels' defense did, and they held them scoreless in the fourth quarter. That's, a Rebels defense. The reason I say they proved themselves is because against LSU, it's like, okay, yeah, they held them under 20, but how good is LSU's offense, really? They played well defensively against Tulane as well. There's that gap in competition, but Tulane has stepped up and beaten 2 other Power 4 programs. So I think that is a little bit more, that was kind of a sign that this defense can play pretty well. But they had struggled against Arkansas and Georgia. Now, for Ole Miss, we're going to have to keep an eye on them because this is not like the end of the line or anything like that. Their schedule is pretty easy the rest of the way. I think at this point, with a win in this game, Ole Miss, barring a shocking upset or two, is pretty much a lock for the college football playoff. Something else for them, their offense looks really good. Trinidad Chambliss, over 360 total yards. Kawan Lacey, 70 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. And then, again, kind of a storyline to watch for this team is their ability to get like a different receiver to make a big impact in every game. This time it was Winston Watkins, who had 111 receiving yards. The Rebels now have 8 receivers or players, because Lacey is one of these players, with over 100 receiving yards. They don't have a single player that has over 500, so they don't have a single like star, but they have a really good group of guys who can catch the ball. And so that's something to watch for Ole Miss. Again, we'll kind of see how that looks in the playoff as well. I think their offense is definitely clicking. I don't think that's as much of a question. You know, they had some issues here and there. I think of that Washington State game. You know, that's kind of a sleepy start time, though. So how much of that is down to the surrounding circumstances versus offensive issues? I think Ole Miss is looking good. How their defense holds up, though, they're going to, you know, they have been playing on the better side of things, but they still have those games where they kind of struggled. So keep an eye on the Rebels and how they do in that area. Next up, Vanderbilt continues their best start since 1941, shuts down Ahmad Hardy and Missouri in a 17-10 win. Diego Pavia got the go-ahead rushing touchdown with 1:52 left in the fourth. He had not his best game for sure, 10 for 19, 129 yards, threw an interception, and then also rushed for 20 yards and a touchdown. But the Commodores' defense played a really good game overall. They didn't put up a lot of big numbers. They only had 1 sack, 4 tackles for loss, but they made those key stops in this game, and that was huge, holding the Tigers to 10 points. Bo Pribula, the Mizzou quarterback, went out with an injury. Matt Zollers came in, played a pretty good game in relief of Pribula, 14 for 23, 138 yards, and a touchdown. But overall, it's a big win for the Commodores, and I'll talk about it here in a little bit when I kind of go over the hierarchy, but they still have some key games to get, but if they can split those 2 meetings that I'll talk about, the Commodores will be a lock for the college football playoff. Finally, in terms of the games that happened this past week, Alabama and Texas both rally from fourth quarter deficits on the road. Alabama at South Carolina, Texas at Mississippi State. We'll start with the Crimson Tide. They were down 22-14 and go on a 14-play, 79-yard drive that ate up 7 minutes and 44 seconds of game time. And then Deontay Lawson gets to Lenora Sellers, forces a strip sack, and Tim Keenan III is there for the recovery. Jeremy Bernard quickly scores a 25-yard go-ahead touchdown, and Alabama survives in Columbia. Ty Simpson, again, a really efficient game passing the ball, over 250 yards and 2 touchdowns for the 6th time this season. 6th time he's passed for over 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, and in every single game that he's played in, all 8 of Alabama's games, he's thrown for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he's certainly in the Heisman discussion. I'll talk about in my Big Ten video, though, who I think is the Heisman favorite. But overall, 29-22 comeback win for the Crimson Tide, who continue to look like probably that second team. They're right there with Texas A&M. Texas A&M, I'll give the benefit of the doubt for that win over Notre Dame and being undefeated, but Alabama is right on their heels right now, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. For Texas, the Longhorns' offense was anemic through the first 3 quarters. They were trailing 31-14 heading into the fourth quarter, but then kind of here's how it unfolded. 5 plays, 80-yard touchdown drive. Mississippi State goes down and scores a touchdown and keeps the lead at 17. But then Texas goes 75 yards on 9 plays, scores a touchdown. Then on the ensuing drive for Mississippi State, Anthony Hill Jr. gets a big sack. Texas then goes down 12 plays, 53 yards, and a field goal. Mississippi State 3 and out, punts the ball, and then kind of the emerging star, kind of a under-the-radar star for Texas, Ryan Niblett, for the second time this season, returns a punt over 75 yards. He goes 79 yards for a punt return touchdown to tie the score at 38. Forced a punt to end regulation, and then Texas backup quarterback Matthew Caldwell throws the go-ahead touchdown pass in overtime, and I think it was Ethan Burke had a forced fumble to end the game and give Texas a 45-38 win in overtime. Now, kind of wrapping things up, going over what I think is the SEC hierarchy. I've got A&M, the top dog right now in the SEC. They're 8-0, 5-0 in conference. Their remaining games at Missouri, home against South Carolina, at Texas. So two big ones, but as long as they don't lose all three, Texas is going to be in the playoff. And then as long as they don't lose, the cupcake game that they have on their schedule as well, which I think is Samford, which tripped up, I think it was Kirk Herbstreit on that broadcast, funny enough. Alabama is my number 2 team in the SEC, 7-1, 5-0 in conference as well. They're home against LSU, who is going to be reeling after firing Brian Kelly. Maybe they'll be fired up and motivated, but I think that team, kind of with that third loss, this is kind of a lost season now. 3 losses possible for the playoff, but not with how many teams there are in the SEC with 2 losses. Home against Oklahoma for the Tide as well, then Eastern Illinois, and then at Auburn. I think both of those 2 teams are virtually a lock to meet. I could see Texas maybe beating Texas A&M, but then I'm not sure how the tiebreakers would work if there ended up being more than just those 2 teams as 1-loss teams. Georgia is my number 3, really kind of down to having that head-to-head over Ole Miss. They're 6-1, 4-1. They have that neutral site game against Florida in Jacksonville, then at Mississippi State, home against Texas, and then a big one in non-conference that I'm really looking forward to, Georgia against Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Now, that one could have college football playoff implications if the Dogs were to lose to either, a shocker against Florida or Mississippi State or against Texas. That's a key game too, Georgia, Texas. That could be huge. Ole Miss is next up to me, 7-1, 4-1 in conference. They're home against South Carolina, home against Florida, and at Mississippi State. Again, Mississippi State's that Egg Bowl. Got to be careful against South Carolina and Florida, but the fact that those are at home in Oxford are going to be big for them. I think the Rebels are in a good position, and if Texas A&M or Alabama trips up, they, I think, will be the most likely team, them or Georgia, they'll be the most likely teams to be waiting kind of in the wings to get in instead. Vanderbilt then, 7-1, 3-1 in conference. They've got 4 conference games left, and there's 2 big ones. They're at Texas this week, which to me is a college football playoff elimination game. I know Vanderbilt's been really good this year, and they might have a chance if they were to beat Tennessee in the regular season finale, but 2 losses for the Commodores would be a big blow. They do host Auburn and Kentucky. Between those games against the 2 UT schools, Texas and Tennessee, those 2 fan bases can argue out in the comments which one is the true UT. But that's the outlook for Vandy. I think they probably can split. And I know I kind of made it sound like maybe if they lose, who knows, but I think they could probably split. Then Texas. Texas basically has a 3-game playoff play-in run to end the regular season. They're going to get Arkansas at home in the penultimate game of the season, but they're also going to have Vanderbilt at home. That one's coming up this next week. I'm going to obviously be previewing that game later this week. At number 5, Georgia. Again, mentioned that game earlier. That one's huge. And then home against Texas A&M. I think it goes without saying, with 2 losses, Texas can't afford to lose again. If they run the table, though, they might not only have a chance to have 2 losses and make the college football playoff, but the fact that one of those wins would be over Texas A&M means they probably hold that tiebreaker and are probably in the SEC championship game. So don't count out Texas yet, but this run can end just as quickly as it gets going if they were to lose one of these games against Vanderbilt or Georgia. Three other teams that are kind of in the running, all in the top 20, which I think is a little bit showing the SEC bias. I think if you're going to rank these teams here, some of those the 2-loss Big Ten teams should be here. I'll maybe talk about that when I go over the Big Ten. But you got Tennessee, Missouri, and Oklahoma. All 3 of those teams are 6-2. All 3 of them play at least 1 game against these other 6 teams that are ahead of them. So a chance to kind of move up. And if chaos ensues and either Alabama or A&M lose 2 conference games, those teams could have a chance. But really, for those 3 teams, it's more, can you get into the playoffs? That's the big question there. Mizzou, their schedule is pretty weak. They've got that chance hosting A&M. That's their one chance. Outside of that, though, if they win that, then they're really back in this picture. Vandy, Tennessee to wrap up the regular season is going to be awesome. Potentially a college football playoff playing game. And then Oklahoma at Alabama, and I think they play LSU. I can't remember now if they're at home or away in that one, but Sooners have a shot to bounce back and stay in that discussion. But that's kind of the outlook of the SEC. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the SEC conference, and stay tuned for my videos this coming week previewing the conference games this coming week.